I know, believe it or not, there's actually an assignment that I enjoy doing as much as I enjoy grading, and I don't mean not at all. Hey, it's good to see you, and of course, that's not really how this works. You see me, and I pretend to see you, but I do get to see bigger numbers every time somebody watches the show, and that's almost as good as actually seeing you. At any rate, I hope you're having a pleasant day, but if not, it's about to get a whole lot more pleasant because we're going to be talking about homework assignments. In particular, we're talking about an assignment that I had to do in college, one that I think actually changed the way I think about writing, and may or may not have set me on my course to study rhetoric and writing style a few years later. In fact, it's a project that I got so much out of that I decided to turn it back on my students the first year I taught, and I've been tweaking and refining it ever since. The best part, though, is that it's consistently an assignment that my students have come back to tell me has been the most enjoyable and useful part of the class. I've had people tell me that it's helped them to find their writing voice, have some fun in the middle of the semester, realize maybe that they aren't as bad of a writer as they thought and that maybe they kind of like it, and even that it's been therapeutic and restorative. But honestly, who cares about all of that? I keep assigning it because they're fun to read. If it actually helps people to improve their writing, I mean, that's a fringe benefit at best, right? In all seriousness, though, I've seen some great things come out of this project, both for myself and for the students I've watched do it over the years. So I want to share it with you today because you don't actually have to be in school to get better, and sometimes you just need a good exercise to start trying things out. So let's just hurry and get into it. When I was a senior in college, I took a class called Writing with Style, taught by a professor who probably bears much of the blame for my headlong plunge into the discipline of rhetoric. In that class, he explained, we would be working on the Copia project, inspired by Erasmus's work Decopia, in which he demonstrates, among other things, a multitude of different ways to say a single thing. So in class, we'd be reading and talking about different approaches to style, and then out of class, it was our job to put those principles into practice, starting with a single narrative and then retelling it in different ways each week, based on a different stylistic goal. I decided to write about a time when, living in Brazil, I rounded a corner and saw the beach after sunset. Now, I had grown up in a state at the foot of the Rockies, so I had never seen the ocean at night. In my experience, there had always been something, some streetlight, some building in between me and the horizon. But the beach was totally dark. That was something I had never experienced before, and it stuck with me, so I figured it would be a good enough thing to write about. So, week after week, I revisited that same unfathomably dark coastline, telling that story in a slightly different way each time. And this, I think, is the fundamental genius of the project, which I can't take any credit for. By focusing on writing about the same thing every time, you don't have to come up with new things to write about. The content is already taken care of. Without the pressure of thinking about what you're going to write, you are free to spend more time thinking about how you write, considering your word choice and the ways that you put sentences together. In that sense, then, this really is a focused practice of experimentation with your own style, because style is the only thing you need to consider. And as I've adapted the assignment to my own classes, I've renamed it the Style Sketchbook, with each individual submission being called a style sketch. It works in basically the same way. I ask students at the beginning of a semester to write a short personal narrative about a page in length, and then week after week I give them a different prompt, encouraging them to write it in a new way. Since style isn't the primary focus of the classes that I teach, I tend to give them more explicit guidance and prompts than I received in a class that was all about style. So I'll invite students to revisit their story and compose it in the style of a horror movie or a children's book. Maybe I'll invite them to tell that story as if they were trying to impress someone. Maybe I'll ask them to try out certain stylistic principles like cohesion or periodic sentences. And if they're lucky, who knows, they might even get to experience some of the cutting-edge research coming out of the Quintillian Institute of Words About Words, and try out some rhetorical figures like anaphora and metonymy. The objective, in any case, is to try out things in a low-stakes way that you normally wouldn't. That's why it's a sketchbook. These aren't meant to be finished, polished, or even publishable pieces. They're rough pencil sketches or stylistic doodles. And from time to time, I'll give them free rein to do whatever they want. I've gotten poems, short animations, comic strips, even one time, a version of the narrative filled with blank spaces and a word search. It was my job then to remember previous versions of the story, find the missing words in the word search, and then reinsert them into the narrative. At the start of a semester, when I explain that my students will be writing the same story over and over every week, there are always a few people who complain that it sounds like it's going to be tedious. But these are also the same contrarians who end up writing sketches that are 2 or 3 times longer than I require, and who go on to take creative writing classes. So it turns out that my sinister scheming might just be effective. So it's all pretty straightforward. Pick a story and then write it in a different way every time. How you go about writing that story is largely up to you, but it's a chance to think about your style, about the way that you present yourself to the readers, about how you want to put individual words together. But it can be helpful sometimes to see an example, so lucky for all of us, I've dug up my original assignment, the sketches that started it all. I won't, of course, subject us to all of them, but here are some excerpts, my various attempts at describing that nighttime beach every week in class. For the first one, I just wrote without an agenda, getting words and thoughts onto paper. Where once there had been ships, sand, trees, and waves in the heat of the day, the nocturnal scene was only of black, featureless, impenetrable, without a single punctuating flash of light, a black that, where the blue had seemed endless and liberating, seemed claustrophobic and foreboding. By week 4, I wanted to try writing only through the senses, describing what was there with minimal commentary or explanation. My feet rooted to one spot on the sidewalk, I gaped at the gap where there existed no light, no sound, no movement. Even the smell of ocean salt seemed suppressed by the void. Staring, I lost sense of the breeze, of the bustling world behind me, of the music that throbbed from a nearby bar. I groped in that blackness for some point of light, some shifting motion, but saw nothing as clearly as if my eyes had been shut. Then I tried out a particular philosopher's project of writing without nouns. Gone were the blowing, the lapping, the dooning that had characterized the diurnal shining, replaced by a terrifying yawning that seemed at once to engulf and to refuse the illuminating, the sensory. Arcing endlessly into the ever-expanding, the hollow swallowed my thinking, my hoping, leaving only a vacant where there had been a wondering. And I also made a couple of attempts at capturing the whole narrative in single sentences. Sand to space, waves to waste, palms and parasols to perdition, night annihilated the beach. Dislodged by the setting sun, the horizon snapped against the sidewalk. And finally, after 13 weeks of experimenting and trying things out, I landed on a version that seemed to capture a lot of what I thought good writing style should do. Almost daily, I breezed by the beach on my way to one appointment or another. Usually from one corner of my eye, I noted the tan sand and the muddy blue water. Trees lined the sidewalk and bobbed in the breeze. It was a beach, heated by an aggressive sun in a humid tropic. One night, though, I saw. After the setting of the sun, there was only a gaping. My feet, fixed, froze themselves to a pavement still warm with the memory of the afternoon. Across the street, the lampposts' glows quailed in the presence of an impenetrable, imposing, black vast. I stared, transfixed by the enormous and hollow. No twinkling from above, no moon glitter on absent waves, no hiss and hush of tidal shuffle. Only an engulfing, a consuming. The hungry reached horizon to zenith yawning. Instead of a girdle, a rent, solid, void. Instead of sweet smell, stink, ocean rot reeking, cadaverous, silent, frozen. Burning instead of beauty, still, immobile, I squirmed and gawked. Heavy, massive, immaterial, the vast hung there, black and unblinking. There, on the other side, empty, empty, empty. It's been several years since that project initially helped me to find my own writerly voice, and though that professor has since retired, his good idea continues to inspire writers even now. It's a project that I've stolen and modified, with his blessing actually, and it has provided an ongoing stream of highlights in my own teaching career. Often, writing style gets treated as something shallow, something beside the point of creating real serious arguments or award-winning plots. But honestly, for me, and I think for a lot of others too, style is where the real fun of writing can be found. Style is all about carefully selecting words, swapping them out for more fitting ones, molding the language to your message, and even putting your own personal stamp on your work. Style isn't about writing correctly, it's about writing artfully, and I think it's in developing one's style that writing goes from a chore to a pleasure. And this is an exercise that lets you put everything else on hold and do just that. Focus on your style. Before I did this project, I knew that I wanted to write and that I liked doing it. After, though, I had a much clearer sense of who I wanted to be as a writer. Of course, there was more to it than just writing little one-page stories every week, but that was where the ideas became practice, where I wasn't just thinking about writing, but I was practicing and developing my skills. And that's a process that continues even now as my thinking and priorities evolve. So I hope you'll give this practice a try. Write about that time you tripped on stage, visited France, drank lemonade on a summer afternoon, saw the beach at night for the first time, or got lost in the grocery store as a kid. It doesn't matter too much what it is, but then start trying things out. Stretch your style and find what fits you, your story, and your persona as a writer. Or at the very least, have some fun playing around with words for a few minutes. I can think of several worse ways to spend your time. And though our time together is one of those better uses of time, it is time that time came to an end. So I wish you the very best in your stylistic journey of self-discovery, and I'm excited to hear all about it when we meet here again next week.